Hey everyone, ready to dive deep into the world of Annabelle Comes Home? Released on June 26, 2019, this film has sparked endless discussions, and today, we're uncovering every thrilling detail. If you enjoy this deep dive, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps us grow. And for more incredible movie explorations and hidden gems, subscribe to the channel. Now, let's unravel the magic behind this cinematic masterpiece. Annabelle Comes Home didn't just arrive in theaters. It crept in like a whisper in the dark, unleashing a wave of supernatural tension when it premiered on June 26, 2019. That summer day might have seemed ordinary to most, but for horror fans around the world, it marked the return of one of the most chilling figures in modern horror lore, the cursed doll that started it all. As the seventh installment in the ever-expanding Conjuring universe, and the third chapter in the Annabelle series, this film wasn't just another haunted tale. It was a culmination, a haunting convergence of everything that made this cinematic universe so uniquely terrifying. What makes Annabelle Comes Home extraordinary is that it shifts the horror landscape inward. Instead of wandering into new terrain, it brings the horror home. Literally. The Warren family's seemingly ordinary suburban residence becomes the battleground for a spiritual siege, with Annabelle acting as the key that unlocks an entire pantheon of malevolent forces. And it's not just about the evil she carries, it's about the evil she invites. The film wastes no time plunging viewers into its eerie mythology. It opens with Ed and Lorraine Warren, once again played with masterful precision and quiet intensity by Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga, retrieving the Annabelle doll from a pair of terrified nurses. This isn't their first rodeo, we know that. But this introduction reminds us, once again, of just how dangerous this doll is. She's a beacon for other spirits. Lorraine tells us, and with that single line, the entire foundation for the film is set. Annabelle isn't just haunted. She's a gravitational force for evil. After the Warrens bring her back, they lock her in their artifact room, blessed and sealed behind glass. That should be enough. But in horror, safety is always temporary. Where Annabelle Comes Home sets itself apart is in the way it embraces containment. Unlike its predecessors, which explored sprawling locations or long, winding timelines, this movie keeps us within the walls of the Warren home over the course of one terrifying night. It's tight, intimate, claustrophobic, and it works brilliantly. The tension doesn't come from running away, it comes from not being able to. With Ed and Lorraine away for the evening, their daughter Judy is left in the care of her babysitter Mary Ellen, a kind-hearted, gentle soul played by Madison Iseman. Judy, portrayed by the immensely talented McKenna, isn't just the creepy kid trope personified. She's layered, haunted not only by spirits but by the heavy legacy of her parents' work. She sees things too. She knows things most kids her age don't. Her fear is different, it's quiet, internalized. And in that silence, the film finds some of its most effective emotional beats. But it's the arrival of Daniela, played with both vulnerability and reckless energy by Katie Sarif, that turns curiosity into catastrophe. Daniela's grief over the loss of her father leads her to the one room she should never have entered, the artifact room. The sequence is excruciating in the best way. Each object she touches, each creaking hinge, feels like a warning. And then, inevitably, she opens the case. Not out of malice, but desperation. And once Annabelle is free, so too are all the horrors that were waiting. This unleashing is where the movie blossoms into something much more ambitious than your standard haunted house fare. The doll doesn't stalk its victims in the typical sense. Instead, her influence awakens a host of cursed entities that bring their own terrifying flavor to the chaos. The ferryman, a ghoulish figure who demands coins to ferry the dead across, leaves trails of ghostly currency and shadows that flicker with every blink. The ominous bride, draped in a decaying wedding gown, stalks the halls with knife in hand. There's the black shuck, a demonic hound that haunts the fog-shrouded backyard. And perhaps most unsettling is the sheer silence that often precedes their arrival. The film plays like a symphony of hauntings, with each ghost contributing a distinct note of dread. Yet none of it feels random. Gary Dauberman, in his directorial debut after penning several other Conjuring films, orchestrates the scares with surprising restraint. He doesn't just go for jump scares, though there are a few very effective ones. He builds suspense through stillness, through the suggestion of presence. A door creaks open just a little too slowly. A shadow lingers too long in the frame, and the viewer is left holding their breath, waiting. Doberman's approach is reverent to what came before, but not beholden to it. He introduces new elements, new threats, and plants seeds for future stories without overwhelming the core narrative. Visually, the film is lush with atmospheric dread. Cinematographer Michael Burgess brings the Warren home to life not as a place of comfort, but as a labyrinth of potential horrors. The camera glides slowly, almost reluctantly, through hallways dimly lit by flickering bulbs and lightning flashes. The artifact room itself is a masterclass in production design. Every object tells a story or hints at one. There's a palpable sense that you're looking at living history, or more chillingly, undead history. These aren't props, they're traps. And while the setting may be enclosed, the emotional scope of the film is wide. Each character is haunted, not just by spirits, but by personal demons. Judy struggles with isolation, with being the weird kid at school because of who her parents are. Mary Ellen, brave and nurturing, begins to question what she's gotten herself into. Daniela, guilt-ridden, wants redemption, but she's going to have to fight her way toward it. Even side characters like Bob Palmieri, nicknamed Bob's Got Balls, offer moments of levity that never feel out of place. His sweet, awkward affection for Mary Ellen brings a softness to the nightmarish proceedings, reminding us that even in the darkest moments, human connection persists. The performances are uniformly strong, especially from the young cast. McKenna Grace delivers a performance beyond her years, carrying both the emotional and supernatural weight of the story with quiet intensity. Madison Eisman balances fragility and fortitude, making Mary Ellen a standout in the franchise's roster of reluctant heroines. And Katie Sarif injects Daniela with so much pain and desperation that it becomes impossible to see her as just the troublemaker. She's the heart of the film in many ways, the one who breaks the world apart and spends the rest of the runtime trying to put it back together. But what truly elevates Annabelle Comes Home is how it encapsulates the essence of the Conjuring universe while expanding its boundaries. It's a film about spirits, yes, but it's also about grief, guilt, courage, and love. It respects its audience by not over-explaining the supernatural. Instead, it lets fear simmer in the unknown, in the half-seen, in the could-be, and for longtime fans, it's a reward. The countless Easter eggs in the artifact room, the references to other films, and the hints at possible future spin-offs make it a treasure trove of lore. It's the cinematic equivalent of wandering into a haunted museum where every exhibit might come to life. It also became a cultural phenomenon not just because of its scares, but because of its timing and tone. In a horror landscape often dominated by gore and nihilism, Annabelle Comes Home offered something different. A horror film with heart. One that didn't rely on brutality but on atmosphere. On building tension with shadows instead of screams. The idea of a locked room in your house filled with cursed objects captured the imagination of audiences. And the very concept, that evil could be invited in, not always by force, but by pain, by longing, resonated. It wasn't just about surviving a haunting. It was about confronting what haunts you. Audiences left the theater talking not just about what scared them, but about what stayed with them. The way a scene lingered in their mind long after the credits rolled. The quiet sob of a ghost just beyond the frame. The idea that your worst fears might already live in your home, just waiting to be woken up. And isn't that what great horror does? It doesn't vanish with the lights. It follows you. It makes you think twice about the shadows in your room or the doll collecting dust on a shelf. In the end, Annabelle Comes Home is more than a horror film. It's a carefully woven nightmare filled with myth, emotion, and deeply rooted human fears. It's a movie that takes a simple premise, a babysitting job gone wrong, and spins it into a night of revelations and reckoning. Whether you're a hardcore fan of the Conjuring universe or a newcomer looking to be properly unsettled, this film delivers. It doesn't just tell a ghost story, it invites you into one. And once you're inside, it doesn't let you leave unchanged. So when that release date rolls back around June 26, 2019, remember it wasn't just a horror movie premiere. It was the night a doll came home. And with her, she brought every ghost still waiting to be heard. The eerie silence of the Warren family home is punctuated only by the soft hum of a distant wind, as Annabelle Comes Home opens with a slow-burning sense of dread. The camera lingers on the calm suburban neighborhood, but it's clear from the very first shot that something isn't quite right. It's a feeling that's difficult to shake. The atmosphere thick with suspense, anticipation, and the certainty that danger is never far behind. The film wastes no time pulling us back into the world of Ed and Lorraine Warren, the renowned paranormal investigators whose lives have been spent battling spirits, demons, and dark forces beyond our comprehension. We find them in the midst of an investigation, this time tasked with retrieving the infamous Annabelle doll. Played once again by Vera Farmiga and Patrick Wilson, the couple exudes a quiet, unshakable authority. Lorraine, her face soft but resolute, gazes into the spirit world for answers, while Ed is a man of action, carrying the doll with grim determination. What's so chilling about this moment is the reality of their work. They don't just confront evil. They live with it, day in and day out. The stakes are always high, the danger ever present. When they finally secure Annabelle and lock her away in the glass case within their sacred artifact room, it's not a moment of triumph. It's one of containment. The horrors they faced are now safely out of reach, or so they believe. We're immediately introduced to Judy Warren, their young daughter, played by McKenna Grace with remarkable depth. Judy's world is one of isolation, both self-imposed and forced upon her by the strange nature of her parents' work. Her life is constantly overshadowed by the dark forces that swirl around her family. She's not like other kids. She can see things, feel things that others can't. In the beginning, Judy is portrayed as a resilient but lonely child, a girl who has come to understand that her gift, or curse, makes her an outcast. Her emotions are palpable. There's an underlying sadness in her that reflects both the burden and the extraordinary nature of her existence. Judy is smart, kind, and incredibly mature for her age, but she's haunted by a legacy she didn't ask for. The arrival of Mary Ellen, her babysitter for the night, is a welcome distraction. Mary Ellen, played by Madison Eisman, is the polar opposite of Judy in many ways: lighthearted, outgoing, and full of youthful optimism. Her bubbly personality contrasts sharply with the shadow that looms over Judy's life. It's immediately clear that Mary Ellen is not only a caretaker but also a friend to Judy. She represents the normalcy and joy that Judy longs for, even if that world is increasingly distant and foreign to her. The moment Mary Ellen walks into the house, her very presence serves as a temporary relief from the tension that's been building. But there's a nagging sense that this brief respite won't last. But the real catalyst for the horror to come is Daniela, played with haunting vulnerability by Katie Sarif. Daniela isn't like the others. She's not innocent or carefree. She's grieving the loss of her father, an event that has clearly left deep scars on her. Unlike Judy, Daniela actively seeks a connection to the supernatural. She believes that if she can just reach out to her father, maybe, just maybe, she can find some form of peace. And so, despite Mary Ellen's protests, Daniela convinces her to take her upstairs to the artifact room. There, she does what none of them should have done. She opens the case containing Annabelle. It's an act of desperation, of pain, and most importantly, an act of ignorance. The consequences are immediate and catastrophic. The moment Daniela releases the doll, it's as if a storm has been unleashed. There's a sudden shift in the air, a crackling sense of wrongness that reverberates throughout the house. Annabelle, though immobile and silent, is now free to act. The characters are blissfully unaware of the danger they've just set loose, but the audience knows better. We understand the evil that lies dormant within the doll. The spirit that's been waiting for release now has a foothold in the world once again. This is where the tension in the film starts to grow exponentially. The atmosphere changes. The safety of the Warren home, once an impregnable fortress, now feels precarious. The familiar, once comforting, becomes a haunted cage. Once the doll is freed, the spirits begin to stir. The first of them is the ferryman, a terrifying spectral figure who collects the coins of the dead. He is introduced subtly at first, lingering just out of sight. The tension mounts as we begin to realize that Annabelle's release has invited more than just her own malevolent presence. It has opened the floodgates to a multitude of vengeful spirits. These spirits do not come all at once, but they stalk the characters, inching closer with each passing moment. The presence of the ferryman is especially eerie. His arrival is heralded by a soft jingling sound, the unmistakable sound of coins, and then a shadow moving just beyond the edge of the frame. Every time the camera shifts, the ferryman is closer, his malevolent gaze tracking the characters as they move through the house. While the supernatural forces begin to rise, Annabelle Comes Home maintains its emotional focus on the characters. The first half of the movie builds upon Judy's isolation, Mary Ellen's growing concern, and Daniela's mounting guilt. Daniela's arc is especially compelling. She's the one who unleashed the chaos, and every time she interacts with the other characters, we sense her inner turmoil. Her grief and guilt are tangible, and as the night wears on, her desperation to make things right intensifies. The house, once filled with hope and normalcy, is now a pressure cooker of rising fear and dread. Each corner, each creaking floorboard, is a reminder of the darkness lurking just beyond reach. Mary Ellen's role as the babysitter, initially seemingly innocuous, becomes central to the story's progression. She's not just caring for Judy, but she's also unknowingly placed herself in the line of fire. When the supernatural forces begin to make themselves known, Mary Ellen is forced to step up in ways she never imagined. Her initial innocence, her naivety, is shattered as she is thrust into the horror that her friends and Judy are facing. The house becomes a maze, each room a potential trap. And just when you think things can't get worse, they do. Shadows seem to follow them. Objects move without explanation. The oppressive atmosphere of the house heightens every step, every decision, as the characters unknowingly walk into the jaws of terror. The supernatural elements are skillfully interwoven with the personal stakes of the characters. Judy's relationship with her parents is complex, deeply rooted in love, but also tinged with a quiet resentment. She loves them, but she's burdened by the legacy of their work. The ghosts she encounters aren't just figments of the supernatural. They're a manifestation of her internal struggles. The more she interacts with the spirits, the more we see how she is both a victim of her family's choices and a protector of the world they inhabit. Her moments of connection with Mary Ellen are some of the film's most poignant. It's these quiet, human moments that make the horror so much more visceral. It's not just about survival, it's about relationships, and how they're tested when faced with unimaginable fear. The first half of Annabelle Comes Home is a masterclass in building suspense. The film takes its time, allowing tension to mount in measured increments. The supernatural forces that once seemed distant are now a tangible presence, creeping closer with each scene. The shift from comfort to terror is subtle but deliberate. It's a slow burn that captures the essence of a home becoming a prison. There are moments of false relief, moments when you think the danger has passed, but then the tension spikes again, often in unexpected ways. The lighting plays a huge role in this, with shadows creeping across rooms, and light flickering just enough to leave you on edge. And just as the spirits begin to wreak havoc, we're left with the unsettling knowledge that the Warrens, the ones who understand this world better than anyone, are nowhere to be found. Ed and Lorraine are on their way back, but they won't arrive in time to save their daughter. It's a terrifying thought. The one place that should be safe is now the most dangerous of all. As the second half of Annabelle Comes Home begins, the atmosphere inside the Warren home has shifted from eerie stillness to full-blown chaos. The spirits that Annabelle has unleashed are no longer lurking in the shadows. They are fully present, twisting the reality inside the house and dragging each character into their own personalized nightmare. The house, once filled with warm furniture, childhood photos, and protective wards, now feels like a living, breathing entity bent on torment. Each room becomes a battleground between the living and the dead, and each character is now a soldier forced into a war they never intended to fight. Judy Warren, now fully aware that Annabelle's case has been opened, quickly realizes the true magnitude of the threat. This isn't like any previous disturbance. This is deeper, darker. Annabelle doesn't just haunt. She summons. She manipulates. She lures other spirits to her like a beacon. What Judy understands, before even the adults, is that the doll must be contained again. But how do you fight something you can't touch? Something that twists the fabric of space around you and makes you doubt your own senses. The first manifestation of Annabelle's full power arrives in terrifying fashion. A brutal encounter with the ferryman pushes Mary Ellen into direct conflict with the supernatural. She finds herself lost in the darkened corridors of the house, and coins begin appearing from nowhere. Cold, heavy, and inexplicably placed on the eyes of lifeless mannequins and photographs. The ferryman, with his hollow gaze and floating silver coins, traps her in a loop of flickering lights and vanishing exits. The editing during this sequence is masterful. Rapid cuts, ghostly echoes, and shifting perspectives create a sense of panic not just for Mary Ellen, but for the audience as well. We're not just watching her get haunted. We're trapped there with her, grasping for a way out as her flashlight flickers and shadows dart across the screen. Meanwhile, Daniela's storyline takes a far more personal turn. She has been pulled deeper into the artifact room, where her regret and longing for her father become a conduit for manipulation. A voice calls out to her, soft, familiar, fatherly. It's the kind of hope that would destroy someone like her, and Annabelle knows exactly how to exploit it. Daniela isn't just haunted by spirits, she's haunted by grief. And in the twisted logic of the supernatural, her longing becomes an invitation. The mourner's bracelet begins to glow, a cursed object said to connect the wearer with the dead, and it begins to lead her deeper into the nightmare. Daniela sees visions of her father, hears him speak, and it's so real, so believable, that she almost succumbs. It's one of the most emotionally charged parts of the film, not because of gore or jump scares, but because it shows the real cost of pain. Annabelle doesn't need to be violent. She just has to convince you to believe. While all this unfolds, Judy becomes the emotional anchor of the film. The young girl who was once in the background now steps into the spotlight with strength that belies her age. Her parents' absence becomes her crucible. She's seen spirits her whole life, but now she has to face them alone. The ghost of the priest, the same one she saw outside her school, makes a dramatic reappearance, offering her cryptic warnings that blend fear with spiritual truth. Her connection to the spirit world grows sharper, and her ability to see what others can't becomes the key to navigating the escalating horror. In a particularly tense moment, Judy and Mary Ellen reunite, but their relief is short-lived. They discover that the entire house has become warped. The rules of physics no longer apply. Doors lead to nowhere, mirrors reflect things that aren't present, and clocks have all stopped. It's as if Annabelle's chaos is feeding off their fear. And fear is everywhere. It's in Mary Ellen's racing pulse, in Daniela's trembling hands, in Judy's wide, knowing eyes. The film doesn't slow down. Every beat builds upon the last, stacking suspense until it becomes unbearable. And then comes the game changer, the werewolf. Yes, you read that right. The hellhound of the Warrens' artifact room breaks free. A towering, fur-covered beast with glowing eyes and a snarl that rips through the silence like a shotgun blast. It doesn't just chase, it hunts. Mary Ellen becomes the focus of this primal terror, chased into the backyard, where the darkness conceals far more than moonlight. This sequence plays like a nightmare within a nightmare. The werewolf isn't just physical. It embodies every deep-rooted childhood fear. Something wild, something that doesn't follow rules. It's a sharp shift in tone from the subtle spiritual hauntings to something more visceral and immediate. But somehow it works, because Annabelle Comes Home has built a world where anything is possible, and where everything is deadly. Back inside, Daniela is now trapped in the artifact room, where each cursed object begins to activate. She sees flashbacks of the spirits who were bound to them, the bride possessed by bloodlust, the samurai whose armor drips with ancient vengeance, and others that we never even get full backstories for, adding to the terrifying ambiguity of it all. But it's here, in the heart of this spiritual epicenter, that Daniela finally realizes the truth. She can't change the past. She can't bring her father back. Her grief was real, but so was the danger. It's a turning point for her. Rather than run, she begins to fight, mentally, emotionally, breaking Annabelle's psychological grip, one painful memory at a time. Her arc is not about surviving the ghosts, it's about surviving herself. Judy, now fully embracing her intuitive gifts, discovers that the spirits are growing more aggressive because Annabelle is amplifying their presence. She's not just a haunted doll. She's a lightning rod for evil. Every curse, every ghost, every malevolent force in the house is feeding off her energy. It becomes clear that the only way to stop this nightmare is to return her to the sacred glass case blessed by a priest. But of course, the house won't let them do it easily. The climax begins as Judy and Mary Ellen venture into the artifact room, with Daniela fighting her way back through wave after wave of psychological torture. The spirits close in, shadows swirl, and Annabelle seems to shift places at will. One moment on the floor, the next in their arms, the next on the ceiling, grinning with eyes that aren't alive but feel far too sentient. They're dragged, slammed, and tormented, but together, they press forward. Judy uses her knowledge of the blessed artifacts, using a rosary and holy water to create a temporary safe zone. Mary Ellen clutches the doll, her hands shaking, teeth clenched. Daniela kicks open the door in the final seconds, and they finally get her back into the case. The moment the case is sealed, everything stops. The cold air vanishes. The spirits retreat. The house lets out an almost imperceptible sigh. It's over. Not with a dramatic explosion or final scream, but with the soft click of a lock. Evil doesn't always go out screaming. Sometimes, it slips quietly back into the shadows. And then the emotional resolution begins to unfold. The Warrens return the next morning, greeted not by panic, but by three shaken but transformed young women. Judy hugs her parents tighter than ever before, not because she's scared, but because she understands them now. Their world is her world, and she's ready for it. Mary Ellen's bravery, once rooted in instinct, is now hardened into experience. She walks a little taller, and Daniela, who began this journey haunted by guilt and grief, has faced her past and survived it. She may not have received the message from her father she wanted, but she found peace in herself. The final scenes tie everything together with quiet power. Judy brings a birthday cake to her school, and for the first time the other kids join her. She's not just the weird girl with ghost-hunting parents anymore. She's a survivor, a protector, a Warren. The artifact room remains sealed, but the audience knows the truth. It's only ever one mistake away from chaos. The spirits are real. The danger is eternal. But so is the courage of those willing to fight back. Annabelle Comes Home ends not with a bang, but with a deep emotional resonance. It's a film that transforms its characters through terror, then redeems them through resilience. Every twist, every haunting, every scream was building to this three strangers becoming warriors, bound by a night they will never forget. And as the credits roll, the doll remains behind glass, smiling faintly, waiting. In the heart of Annabelle Comes Home, amidst its supernatural storms and escalating terror, lies a core made not of spirits or cursed relics, but of people, flawed, brave, grieving, growing. The film may be framed by the malevolent pull of a porcelain doll, but what gives it emotional weight and lasting impact is its characters. Their vulnerabilities become the gateway to fear, and their growth becomes the anchor that holds the story together when everything else is unraveling. Each main character isn't just reacting to the horror. They're being transformed by it, challenged at their deepest levels and forced to confront what truly haunts them. Judy Warren is the emotional nucleus of the film. At just 10 years old, she carries a burden far heavier than her age suggests. The daughter of Ed and Lorraine Warren, famed demonologists, Judy has inherited not only their knowledge but also their ability to see into the spirit world. This sight, a gift and a curse, isolates her. She's quiet, observant, and profoundly aware that the world she occupies isn't the same as the other children's. Early in the film, we see this clearly. At school, she's shunned, whispered about, feared because of the things her classmates have heard about her parents. There's a crushing loneliness in those moments, and McKenna Grace delivers them with stunning nuance. Her performance is never overly dramatic. It's restrained, steeped in silent pain and hidden strength. We feel her fear, not of ghosts, but of being different, of being alone. But Judy isn't just a passive observer of supernatural events. When the night unravels and Annabelle's power is unleashed, Judy emerges as the story's unlikely heroine. She doesn't scream the loudest or run the fastest, but she sees the clearest. Her connection to the spirits allows her to anticipate danger. But more than that, her moral compass keeps her grounded. Unlike the others, she understands the stakes immediately. She doesn't need convincing. What makes her arc so compelling is that she transitions from a girl afraid of her own legacy to someone who embraces it. She sees what her parents see. She believes what they believe. And in the end, she fights like they fight. There's a particularly powerful moment near the climax when Judy uses holy objects, items she once feared, to ward off the spirits. Her voice shakes, but her hands do not. In that instant, she stops being the child of demonologists and becomes a protector in her own right. It's a quiet transformation, but a monumental one. Then there's Mary Ellen, Judy's babysitter, played with warmth and strength by Madison Iseman. At first glance, she's the archetypal responsible teen. Sweet, polite, dependable. She has that sunny, approachable presence that immediately feels safe. But as the story deepens, so does she. Mary Ellen isn't just babysitting Judy. She's stepping into the Warren world, unknowingly crossing the threshold into a realm where logic has no place. Her initial reactions to the supernatural are grounded and believable. She's not fearless. She's simply determined. As the hauntings begin, we see her instincts kick in. Protect Judy at all costs, stay calm, find solutions. She's the backbone of the group during the chaos, often the first to act and the last to panic. But Mary Ellen's arc is about more than just bravery. She faces the unimaginable and comes out stronger, more self-aware. Her encounters with the ferryman and the hellhound aren't just scares. They're trials. Each force she faces demands something of her. Resilience, speed, courage. And each time she delivers. Madison Iseman gives Mary Ellen a rich emotional range. She never feels like a stock character in a horror film. She feels real, human. And when the chaos settles, and the morning light filters into the Warren home, it's Mary Ellen who emerges visibly changed. Not hardened, but awakened. There's a newfound steel in her. She'll never be the same, and we believe it. Then there's Daniela Rios, played by Katie Sarif, a character who enters the story carrying a different kind of burden. Not fear, but guilt. Daniela is introduced as Mary Ellen's curious friend, the kind who pushes boundaries and asks too many questions. She's fascinated by the Warrens' artifact room, but her obsession isn't just thrill-seeking. It's personal. Daniela lost her father in a car accident, and she blames herself. That guilt, that consuming need for closure, becomes her fatal flaw and the narrative key to unlocking Annabelle's prison. When she enters the artifact room and touches the glass case, it isn't out of malice. It's desperation. She wants to speak to her father. She wants to undo the past. And in doing so, she invites a flood of darkness into the world. Daniela's journey is perhaps the most tragic and complex. She's not a villain. She's a teenager drowning in regret. Her interactions with the supernatural are deeply psychological. While Judy and Mary Ellen are haunted by external threats, Daniela is tormented by her internal world. The spirits don't just scare her. They manipulate her emotions, whisper in her father's voice, present illusions that blur the line between reality and desire. Katie Sarif gives a raw, heartfelt performance that grounds the film's more fantastical elements in real emotional pain. There's a heartbreaking sequence where Daniela believes she's speaking to her father's spirit, his voice soft, forgiving. And she reaches out, tears falling, only to realize it's Annabelle's influence. That shattering moment captures what Annabelle Comes Home does so well. It makes the horror personal. By the film's end, Daniela isn't just a girl who made a mistake. She's someone who's faced her darkest guilt and lived through it. She doesn't get easy answers or magical reunions, but she does get redemption. And in horror, that's rarer than survival. Beyond the central trio, Annabelle Comes Home is peppered with memorable supporting characters, each serving as more than filler. They reflect the film's themes and ground its supernatural elements in everyday humanity. Bob Palmieri, affectionately nicknamed Bob's Got Balls, is a prime example. He begins as comic relief, a clumsy teenage boy with a crush on Mary Ellen, but quickly becomes more than that. His awkward charm and sincere attempts to help add levity without ever undercutting the tension. But even Bob isn't immune to the film's darkness. He has his own face-off with the supernatural, hiding in a chicken coop while the hellhound prowls just beyond. It's a small moment, but it emphasizes the idea that no one, no matter how peripheral, is truly safe when Annabelle is loose. Bob, like the others, has to dig deep for courage. And he finds it. When he returns in the aftermath, shaken but intact, he's no longer just comic relief. He's part of the story's triumph. And of course, there's Ed and Lorraine Warren. Though their screen time is limited in this entry, their presence looms large over the entire film. Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga reprise their roles with familiar grace, infusing their brief scenes with the same quiet authority and deep compassion that made them iconic in the Conjuring universe. They are the guardians of this world, the bridge between the normal and the paranormal. In the opening sequence, they retrieve Annabelle from her previous haunting ground and explain with absolute seriousness that the doll isn't possessed. It's a conduit. It doesn't act alone, it invites others in. This warning, delivered with chilling sincerity, sets the tone for everything that follows. Though absent for most of the story, the Warrens' legacy shapes every moment. Judy is trying to live up to them. Mary Ellen is trying to protect in their absence. Daniela is trying to understand their power. And Annabelle is trying to undo everything they've built. Their return at the end is less a rescue and more a return to order. When Ed and Lorraine walk through the front door, light floods the space again. Safety returns, not because the danger is over, but because they've taught those left behind how to survive it. What makes Annabelle Comes Home so effective as a character-driven horror film is its refusal to reduce its cast to stereotypes. No one is purely brave or purely terrified. Everyone is layered. Everyone is learning. And that's what keeps the film grounded even when ghosts fly through mirrors and demonic werewolves crash through the walls. It's not about who screams the loudest, it's about who changes the most. And in this story, everyone does. From Judy's quiet awakening to Mary Ellen's evolution into protector, from Daniela's journey through grief to Bob's unlikely heroism, Annabelle Comes Home treats its characters with care. It gives them room to breathe, to falter, to grow. The performances, natural, sincere, deeply felt, elevate the film beyond its genre trappings. These aren't just survivors of a haunted night. They are the heart of a story about forgiveness, courage, and the long shadows of the past. Because in the end, that's what Annabelle Comes Home is really about. Not just a doll, not just a haunting, but people. People who carry their fears like scars. People who fight for each other in the dark. And people who, despite everything, still believe in the morning light. As the chaos in the Warren household unfolds and Annabelle's glass case shatters into oblivion, a quiet layer of brilliance begins to emerge beneath the jump scares and demonic apparitions. One that rewards those who watch with an observant eye. Annabelle Comes Home may be a horror film on the surface, but it's also a cinematic tapestry woven with symbols, callbacks, cultural nods, and secrets placed just beneath the surface. Each scene holds whispers of the broader Conjuring universe. Each object teases a story untold, and each shadow seems to hint at something watching, waiting. The film doesn't just invite you to be scared. It invites you to pay attention. And those who do will find that Annabelle Comes Home is far more layered than it first appears. It all begins with the artifact room, the heart of the Warren residence and the soul of the franchise. Within that room are more than just cursed relics. There are dozens of narrative seeds, some already bloomed, others patiently waiting their turn. For instance, the typewriter seen briefly on a cluttered shelf has a presence that's easily overlooked, but it's more than just random decor. It's eerily similar to the one from The Conjuring 2, where Janet Hodgson, the real-life girl at the center of the Enfield poltergeist case, was found sleepwalking in the middle of the night. And in a film so obsessed with the power of words, of names and invocations, the typewriter becomes a subtle nod to the idea that stories themselves can become vessels for spirits. There's a mirror in the corner, too, largely ignored during the frantic action, but it's not without significance. That mirror is the same one referenced in The Conjuring, an object through which Lorraine once saw disturbing visions. In Annabelle Comes Home, we see Daniela walk past it, almost transfixed, as if the mirror is remembering her, or waiting for her reflection to slip. The idea of spirits using mirrors as passageways is classic folklore, but here it's rendered with a particular kind of menace. Later in the film, reflections begin to move before the people they belong to. It's subtle, nearly imperceptible on first viewing, but it plants unease in the back of the viewer's mind. You don't even know why you're unsettled until you go back and watch again. Perhaps the most sinister foreshadowing comes through sound. Early on, while Ed and Lorraine are transporting Annabelle through foggy back roads, the car radio sputters before dying out completely. Static replaces music, and beneath that static, if you listen closely, there's something else, something whispering. It doesn't sound like a language. It sounds like breathing. This moment quietly establishes a rule of the film. Annabelle doesn't just affect the physical world. She corrupts the very frequencies around her. Later, when the girls are home alone and music begins playing on its own, it's not random. It's part of the same pattern, an invisible signal that something has slipped through. Even the choice of music isn't arbitrary. When Judy and Mary Ellen listen to Baby Blue on the record player, it might seem like a classic teenage moment, something to break the tension. But in horror, there's rarely a moment without meaning. That song has a long urban legend tied to it. Stories of people hearing it before ghostly encounters, claims that it was linked to death curses. Whether the filmmakers intended to reference this or simply tapped into the cultural memory surrounding the song, it's a brilliant touch. The track becomes an auditory omen, luring the audience into a false sense of security before the house's energy turns dark. There are also layers of spiritual symbolism baked into the design of the house itself. The placement of crucifixes, so ubiquitous they almost fade into the background, is intentional. Look closely during key scenes, especially when the girls are walking through the dim hallways, and you'll notice the crucifixes are always facing in slightly different directions, never aligned. It's a detail easy to overlook, but it hints that the protective balance of the home is slowly being disturbed. By the time the spirits are unleashed, these crucifixes seem to be watching rather than warding, silent, skewed witnesses to the invasion. One of the most intricate threads involves the ferryman, an entity introduced in this film but teased long before. His coins, laid carefully over the eyes of the dead, show up not only in the artifact room but in subtle places throughout the film. They're on bookshelves, beside candlesticks, even in the edge of a photo frame. And their symbolism runs deep. In ancient Greek mythology, the ferryman, Charon, transports souls across the river Styx, but only if they have coins to pay for the journey. Annabelle Comes Home doesn't just borrow this concept, it haunts with it. The coins become a metaphor for judgment, for passage, for inescapable consequence. And when Judy sees the souls of the ferryman's victims, with their coin-covered eyes, it's not just a scare. It's a confrontation with the idea that death is a transaction, and Annabelle holds the bank. But the ferryman isn't the only spirit with mythological roots. The Black Shuck, the demonic hellhound that stalks Bob, is drawn from English folklore, a beast said to herald death wherever it appears. It's not the first time dogs have appeared in the Conjuring universe. Remember the ominous fate of the family dog in The Conjuring? That moment helped condition audiences to associate canine reactions with impending doom. So when the Shuck appears, not just as a shadow, but as a full-on, snarling predator, it connects to that primal association we've already learned. Dogs know. And if one turns against you, you're already lost. The film also rewards longtime fans of the Conjuring universe with sly nods and reappearances. When Judy walks past the case files in the Warren office, she touches a photograph, barely lingering. That photo, as it turns out, is a family portrait of the Perron family from the first Conjuring. It's there not as a simple callback, but as a subtle reminder that these stories are all interconnected. The terror isn't isolated, it ripples. Each cursed object in that room, each face in a frame, each newspaper clipping taped to the wall, carries a full narrative history. Even the newspaper clippings themselves contain rich subtext. One, briefly visible in the background, references the disappearance of a priest in Amityville, linking directly to the infamous haunting that opened The Conjuring 2. Another talks about unexplained occurrences at a farmhouse in Connecticut, a nod to the Smurl haunting, another real-life case the Warrens investigated. These brief flashes reinforce the scale of the world the filmmakers have built. This isn't just about Annabelle. She's part of something bigger, and everything in that artifact room could spawn a nightmare of its own. Perhaps the most meta layer of detail comes in the form of Daniela's arc. When she interacts with the haunted objects, she's not just a curious teen. She becomes an avatar for the audience. Her fascination, her decision to touch, to open, to explore. It mirrors the viewer's own desire to know more about each cursed item. She acts out the very temptation that the film itself cultivates. And in doing so, she exposes the cost of that curiosity. The message is clear but cleverly disguised. There's a price for digging too deep, for unlocking things not meant to be opened. The cinematography, too, hides its own secrets. Scenes shot through keyholes, narrow doorways, and fractured glass aren't just stylistic choices. They echo the concept of perspective. You're never seeing the full picture. Much like Judy and her friends, you're glimpsing pieces of a larger truth. In several sequences, especially during ghostly manifestations, reflections and shadows tell a different story than the characters do. There's a chilling moment when Daniela stands in front of the haunted bridal gown, an artifact said to drive women into homicidal rages, and her reflection lingers half a second too long. It's subtle enough to miss, but intentional enough to disturb. Who's really in the mirror? Even the doll herself, Annabelle, is subject to symbolic layering. She's not a ghost. She's not alive. She's an object that channels chaos. Her eyes never move, yet they're always watching. When the spirits appear, be it the ferryman, the bride, or the shuck, they're not independent of her. They orbit her. She is the sun in this nightmarish solar system. The film never spells this out directly, but the visual language makes it clear. Whenever a new spirit appears, Annabelle is either in the room or very near. She doesn't move, but the camera always centers her like an anchor. The film is telling you something. This is her world. Everyone else is just visiting. And in the end, when the Warrens return and place Annabelle back into her case, replacing the warning, "Positively do not open" sign with solemn precision, it feels like more than just restoring order. It feels like sealing a secret, one that's still alive, still waiting. And as the case is locked, the camera lingers not on the Warrens or the girls, but on Annabelle's face. And if you look close, frame by frame, you'll see something in her expression. Not movement exactly, but something that wasn't there before. Satisfaction, maybe, or patience, because she knows the room is still full, and the door someday might open again. That's the true brilliance of Annabelle Comes Home. Beneath its surface-level scares and traditional haunted house structure, it's a dense mythology engine. A film that speaks fluently in the language of fear, symbolism, and lore. Every flickering light is a signal. Every object is a story. And every watch reveals something you missed before. For those who dare to look closer, the reward isn't just terror, it's revelation. Because in this world, even the quietest corners have teeth. Behind the cold glass of Annabelle's case, the evil feels contained. But behind the scenes of Annabelle Comes Home, the chaos was very real. From strange on-set happenings to last-minute rewrites, bizarre cast experiences, and chilling coincidences, this film's creation was almost as haunted as the story it tells. And just like the Warren artifact room, the deeper you dig into the production of this movie, the more mysteries you uncover. This isn't just a horror film. It's a production steeped in the uncanny, where fact sometimes feels more terrifying than fiction. It all started with the decision to give Annabelle her own true centerpiece film. Not just a sequel, but a terrifying ensemble set within the very heart of the Conjuring universe. The Warren home. Director Gary Dauberman, who made his directorial debut with this film, wasn't new to horror. He had already written Annabelle, 2014, Annabelle, Creation, and contributed to IT, 2017. But this time, stepping behind the camera came with a different kind of pressure. He wasn't just shaping a scarefest, he was curating the mythology of an entire cinematic universe. The biggest creative risk? Setting the entire movie almost entirely in one house. For a horror film, that can be a blessing and a curse. The house had to breathe, expand, and terrify without ever changing location. Every room had to feel like a character. And according to the production team, creating that atmosphere wasn't just about set design, it was about energy. The Warren home seen in the film was a meticulously constructed set built on a soundstage, with exacting detail meant to reflect Ed and Lorraine's real-world residence. The artifact room alone took over 6 weeks to build, with prop masters scouring archives, past films, and even actual photos of the Warrens' personal collection to make it as authentic as possible. But strange things started happening once that room was finished. Crew members reported feeling uncomfortable on set, especially around the Annabelle doll. Not the real one, of course. That's still housed safely in Connecticut in a locked case in the real-life Warren Occult Museum. But even the replica doll had a presence. Actress Katie Sarif, who played Daniela, spoke in interviews about how the doll seemed to follow her between takes, not with movement but with energy. She said she often felt cold, even when the lights were burning hot on set. She started sleeping with a crucifix under her pillow during production, just in case. And then there was the clap. A loud clap. According to crew lore, during a late-night shoot inside the artifact room, a loud clapping sound rang out from behind one of the cabinets. Everyone froze. The cameras weren't rolling. No one was supposed to be in the room. A search revealed nothing. No one had clapped. But the sound was captured faintly on a nearby mic. A single clap, deliberate, echoing. The entire crew heard it. They never figured out what caused it. But the eerie incidents didn't stop there. McKenna Grace, who plays Judy Warren, experienced something strange after wrapping a particularly intense emotional scene. She had just finished filming a moment where Judy is being followed by spirits, her fear palpable. When she returned to her dressing room, she found her lights flickering wildly. First, she laughed it off. But then the bulbs burst, shattered, on their own. No one was inside the room before her. The electricians were baffled. Nothing had overloaded. It felt like something didn't want me in there, she later recalled. There's a long-running tradition in horror filmmaking of things going wrong in mysterious ways. Just look at the productions of The Exorcist, Poltergeist, or The Omen. Annabelle Comes Home seemed to carry on that legacy. A priest was even brought to bless the set before filming began. That's not a marketing gimmick. It's something producer Peter Safran insisted on, given the history of the real Annabelle case and the energy surrounding the franchise. According to some, the blessing didn't just bring peace. It brought silence. The eerie feelings on set, they said, calmed for a while afterward. But only for a while. Even the doll itself had secrets. The Annabelle used in Annabelle Comes Home is a screen replica crafted to be as unsettling as possible, more theatrical than the real-world Raggedy Ann doll that inspired the case. But what many don't know is that multiple versions of the doll were created, each designed for different uses. One for wide shots, one for close-ups with subtle facial changes, and one that had slight joint movement. This last one, according to crew members, was stored separately from the others after a night, when it was found slightly shifted between takes, despite being locked in place. Strangely enough, the filmmakers had trouble keeping the case intact. The prop glass case that held Annabelle during scenes was repeatedly found ajar during overnight shoots. The lock was complex, and no one ever admitted to tampering with it. It became such a recurring issue that a crew member was assigned specifically to watch the doll during off hours. They even nicknamed him the doll handler. His job? Make sure Annabelle stayed in her box. And then there's Judy's birthday cake. The scene where the family sings to her, while supernatural energy simmers below the surface. What wasn't seen in the final cut is that during one take, the candles lit themselves. This happened while the camera was still setting up, with no pyrotechnics and no one near the cake. caught the attention of everyone on set. Even Doberman couldn't explain it. It was like someone wanted that shot to start, he later said in a press event, smiling, though clearly unnerved. But beyond the spooky moments, Annabelle Comes Home had creative challenges, too, particularly in balancing the tone. This film is arguably the most fun of the Annabelle trilogy, leaning more into teen horror adventure than its more somber predecessors. That was a calculated risk. The filmmakers wanted to explore fear through the lens of adolescence, through Judy's loneliness, Mary Ellen's growing sense of responsibility, and Daniela's grief-stricken guilt. But finding that balance meant rewriting entire sequences on the fly. Some of the most effective scares in the movie weren't in the original script. They came from on-set improvisation and actor instincts. One such moment, the ferryman's coins rolling across the floor toward Judy. That wasn't planned. The original script had a less visual manifestation. But Doberman, seeing the coins on set, improvised the moment, and it became one of the film's most chilling sequences. The supporting spirits, the black shuck, the bride, and the ferryman, were also late additions to the film. They were originally meant to be background Easter eggs, but their designs were so compelling that Doberman decided to feature them more prominently. This led to late-night reshoots, new makeup tests, and the building of additional minisets within the house. The bridal gown entity, in particular, became a standout and almost got its own spin-off announced shortly after the film's release. The backstory of that cursed dress was created by the writers with as much care as Annabelle's own history, complete with storyboards, death photos, and haunting sketches kept in a private production binder. Another strange but fascinating fact: the real-life Warren's daughter, Judy Spera, formerly Judy Warren, was consulted for the film's portrayal of her as a child. Though the filmmakers took creative liberties, her insights helped shape the emotional heart of the film. She revealed that growing up with Ed and Lorraine wasn't as terrifying as people might think, but she did recall being warned never to enter the artifact room. That warning was echoed in the film. But what makes this detail chilling is that Judy herself claims she once peeked in when she was young and swore she heard whispering. When asked if she thought the spirits were real, her response was simple: "They're not dolls. They're conduits." The film also pays homage to real occult practices in subtle ways. Daniela's obsession with contacting her deceased father mirrors actual seance traditions, and the depiction of spirit manipulation via cursed objects is closely based on real-world demonology as studied by Ed and Lorraine. In fact, the production team hired a real paranormal consultant to advise on how spirits might interact with physical objects. That's how the idea of the ferryman manipulating light, or the bride possessing her victims via touch, came to life. It was rooted in alleged real cases. Some of the controversy surrounding the film didn't come from the horror, but from its PG-13 rating. Many fans believed that the rating would dull the film's edge, but that limitation forced the filmmakers to get more creative. Without relying on gore or excessive violence, they had to use shadow, suspense, and psychological horror instead. Ironically, this made the scares more intense. Some test screenings had audience members reportedly walking out, not from disgust but from sheer tension. Doberman's use of long, silent takes, where the camera holds just a beat too long, was a tactic inspired by classic horror rather than modern shock films. That creative choice may have saved the film from becoming forgettable. And of course, there's the uncanny way the film feels like a spiritual mirror to the real Warren legacy. While many horror films exaggerate for effect, Annabelle Comes Home tried to ground its horror in emotional truth. Judy's struggle to fit in, the grief that drives Daniela's decisions, the longing for connection, all are very real human feelings. The spirits aren't just there to terrify. They're echoes of unresolved pain, anchored in something audiences can feel. That emotional resonance was something both Vera Farmiga and Patrick Wilson, even in their limited screen time, insisted on preserving. They requested rewrites to ensure that the film opened and closed with warmth, because in the Warren philosophy, love is what defeats evil. In the end, Annabelle Comes Home became more than a haunted house story. It was a haunted production, alive with superstition, steeped in myth, and powered by the very energy it depicted on screen. The cast and crew walked away with more than just memories. they walked away with stories. Stories about doors that creaked when no one was near, lights that refused to stay on, and a doll that never blinked, but always seemed to be watching. In a film like Annabelle Comes Home, the horror doesn't wait outside in the dark. It lives inside the walls, beneath the floorboards, and most chillingly, within memory. What sets this entry apart in the Conjuring universe is not just the scare factor, but how those scares are intertwined with emotion, character trauma, and subtle human truths. At its heart, this is a ghost story where grief and guilt haunt just as much as any spirit. And throughout its tightly wound runtime, certain moments stand out, not just for how they make the audience jump, but for how they make us feel, think, and reflect on the unseen forces that pull at us in life. One of the earliest key moments is the eerie car sequence where Ed and Lorraine Warren transport Annabelle to their home. The air is thick with tension before a single ghost even appears. As the car breaks down near a cemetery, the world feels suddenly wrong. It's not the appearance of ghosts that makes this sequence powerful. It's the suffocating stillness, the feeling of being watched. It's in the way Lorraine steps into the fog and hears the voices of the dead, whispering, begging, warning. And then, like a blade in the dark, the spirits appear, not to simply scare, but to announce something larger. Annabelle isn't just a haunted doll. She's a beacon, a magnet for the damned. This scene subtly reframes the entire franchise. Annabelle is not merely possessed. She is a conductor of evil. This opening serves as both a thematic overture and a visual metaphor for the rest of the film. The cemetery, where the dead speak freely, contrasts with the Warren home, where their voices are trapped in relics, waiting to be unleashed. The Warrens' somber warning about keeping Annabelle behind sacred glass isn't just exposition. It's an emotional plea born of experience, a lesson hard-earned. These lines resonate even more deeply with fans who've followed the Conjuring saga, understanding the weight the Warrens carry and the horror they protect the world from. As the narrative shifts to the next day and introduces Judy Warren, her loneliness is palpable. At school, we witness a heartbreaking sequence where her classmates taunt her, whispering that she's weird, mocking her parents' ghost hunting. It's a simple scene on the surface, but it cuts deeper than expected. For Judy, the hauntings are real, but she can't share them. She walks between two worlds, seen and unseen, living and dead. The school hallway becomes its own kind of purgatory. The pain of isolation in childhood is universal, and that's what makes the moment so powerful. We don't need ghosts here to feel the sting. The cruelty of her peers does that all by itself. Another critical moment comes quietly. Judy staring at a framed picture of her parents, her eyes full of worry. McKenna Grace's performance is layered with an emotional maturity far beyond her years. In her silence, we read fear, not just of ghosts, but of inheriting her parents' responsibilities, of having to one day face what they face. Her psychic sensitivity isn't treated as a gimmick, but as a burden she's trying to make peace with. And when we finally see her have a conversation with Lorraine via phone, the scene becomes deeply moving. Lorraine's gentle voice, offering reassurance that there is good in what we do, isn't just for Judy, it's for the audience. It reframes the supernatural not as evil, but as something that can be understood, even helped, if approached with compassion. But of course, Annabelle Comes Home doesn't just haunt with emotions. It hits with primal fear. One of the most effectively crafted horror sequences comes the moment Daniela unlocks the artifact room. Her grief for her father has driven her to a desperate act, believing she can communicate with him through the Warrens' tools. But the room is a trap, and the moment she touches the spirit board, the energy shifts. The camera movements slow, sounds distort. We aren't just watching her enter the room, we're entering it too. The scene lingers. Every glance, every hesitant step toward the doll case builds unbearable tension. It's not jump scares that carry this scene, it's anticipation. And when Annabelle's case is opened, it doesn't explode with theatrics. The doll just sits there, still, quiet, unblinking, but the damage is done. Evil has been invited in. This restrained handling makes the moment even more terrifying. Doberman understands that horror is sometimes most potent when left to our imagination. The unleashing of Annabelle is more mythic than literal. It's Pandora opening the box. It's Eve taking the fruit. And once that glass is open, every cursed object in the room begins to stir. What follows is one of the most creatively orchestrated sequences in the film, the progressive haunting of Mary Ellen as she goes about her evening. While Judy prepares for bed upstairs, Mary Ellen moves through the house, blissfully unaware that the supernatural world is waking around her. Lights dim, shadows stretch, and objects shift ever so slightly. And then the ferryman makes his entrance. The coins, those small, innocuous coins, become instruments of dread. Rolled across the floor with eerie precision, they lead Mary Ellen into a hallway that feels just a little too quiet. Then come the footsteps, the low rattling breath, the sudden darkness, and then nothing. No attack, no screaming ghost, just Mary Ellen staring into empty space. The scare doesn't land with a scream, it lands with stillness. That restraint turns the audience into participants. We're leaning forward, scanning the shadows, wondering if something is about to move. Perhaps the most emotionally charged moment arrives when Judy, home alone in the artifact room, encounters the spirit of the bride. She's drawn toward the dress, transfixed. The entity looms, and the camera lingers on Judy's expression. Part horror, part curiosity, part recognition. This isn't just a haunted dress. It's a story. The mirror, nearby, reveals the possessed bride lunging again and again, locked in her final violent moments. Each time the lights flicker, the attack resets. The scene plays like a supernatural loop, echoing trauma that can't find peace. It's an analogy for Judy's own internal fears, that the horrors her parents face will repeat, cycle, and ultimately claim her as well. What's remarkable is that Judy never screams. She watches. She survives. Her courage in this moment isn't loud. It's quiet, grounded, real. And then there's Daniela's arc. Initially positioned as the reckless friend, her emotional journey is revealed in fragments until a full picture emerges. The moment she's trapped inside the artifact room, surrounded by spirits, is one of the film's most surreal and psychologically disturbing sequences. Mirrors distort her reality. Hands reach from shadows. But none of these compare to the scene where she finally sees her father's spirit, or what she believes to be him. Her sorrow pours out in a heartbreaking monologue where she begs for forgiveness. But the entity doesn't embrace her. It snarls. And Daniela realizes too late, this is not her father. This is something using her pain as a weapon. This moment is devastating. It's not just a ghost scene. It's about manipulation, vulnerability, and the way grief can open us to dark influences. The scene isn't about the horror of seeing a spirit. It's the horror of realizing you've been tricked by your own hope. The climax of the film brings all these threads together in a visually and emotionally charged sequence. Judy and Mary Ellen descend back into the artifact room, determined to trap Annabelle again. But the room has changed. It's no longer just a storage space. It's alive. Spirits flicker into view. The black shuck growls from behind shelves. The typewriter types on its own. The pacing of this final confrontation is precise, unrelenting. And yet, at its core, it's not about destroying evil, it's about containment. This film doesn't end with a demon vanquished. It ends with a prison restored. That's what makes the final act so thematically rich. Evil isn't defeated, it's managed. And that's the legacy the Warrens carry. And finally, there's the closing scene. Judy's birthday party. A moment of light after so much darkness. The cake is cut, friends gather, and for once, laughter replaces silence. It might seem like a simple, feel-good resolution, but it's so much more. It's about validation. Judy is no longer isolated. Her story has been heard. Her mother's voice, echoing from earlier, lingers in our minds. Your gift is a blessing. The film ends on that note, not of terror, but of belonging. It's a powerful reminder that horror, at its best, doesn't just scare. It heals. It unearths buried truths and lets the light back in. Audience reactions reflected this duality. While many praised the film for its traditional scares and creative spirit designs, others were moved by the emotional undercurrents. Some found themselves unexpectedly tearing up during Daniela's redemption. Others spoke about Judy's bravery resonating with their own childhood experiences of being misunderstood or dismissed. The film struck a rare balance, simultaneously a love letter to horror fans and a tender story about grief, healing, and family. Annabelle Comes Home may not have the most bombastic finale in the Conjuring universe, but its strength lies in the quiet moments, in the space between breaths, between heartbeats, where fear lives not just in shadows, but in memory. Its most impactful scenes don't shout, they whisper, and in those whispers, they leave us haunted in the best possible way. In the world of horror filmmaking, it's often the things that remain unseen that matter most. Shadows, sounds, the subtle bend of light in a quiet hallway. And in Annabelle Comes Home, the craftsmanship behind these elements is a masterclass in restraint and psychological control. This isn't a film that roars onto the screen with blockbuster spectacle. It whispers, it creeps, and it invades your sense of safety. The result is a haunting experience carefully orchestrated by a team that deeply understands the language of fear. What makes this movie feel so effective starts with the vision of director Gary Dauberman, making his feature directorial debut after years as a screenwriter in the Conjuring universe. His approach was rooted not just in delivering jump scares, but in creating an atmosphere that lived and breathed with tension. Dauberman's creative choice to set nearly the entire film within the Warren home, a decision that might seem limiting at first, became the film's secret weapon. Like the haunted house in The Haunting or the Overlook Hotel in The Shining, the Warren residence becomes its own character, transforming with each scare, becoming more alive and claustrophobic with every passing frame. But making a house terrifying isn't just about lighting and sound. It's about movement. Dauberman and cinematographer Michael Burgess understood this intimately. The camera is constantly gliding, creeping just behind characters, drifting slowly through doorways as if it too is haunted. One particularly effective technique used throughout the film was the long take, a style that allows tension to simmer rather than boil over too quickly. In scenes where characters explore the artifact room, or when Judy walks down dimly lit hallways, the camera never rushes. It lets the dread breathe. The absence of quick cuts forces the viewer to sit in the moment, to search the shadows, to feel like they are being watched too. And that sense of presence was no accident. One of the most intriguing technical choices made in the film was the use of practical effects wherever possible. In an era increasingly dominated by CGI, Annabelle Comes Home leans into physicality. The ferryman, the black shuck, the samurai armor, these weren't just computer creations added in post. They were often full-scale props and animatronics, meticulously designed to live on set and interact with the actors in real time. This decision gave the performers something tangible to react to, grounding their fear in the real world. One particularly memorable scene involving the ferryman's coins used a clever mix of rigged flooring and precise timing. As the coins rolled eerily across the floor toward Mary Ellen, they weren't digitally animated. Instead, they were guided by invisible rig lines and magnets carefully positioned beneath the floorboards. The result was a ghostly motion that looked unnatural but was very real, enhancing the uncanny quality of the moment. It's this kind of detail that separates good horror from great horror. It's not just about the scare, but about how real it feels in the moment. And then, of course, there's Annabelle herself. The doll is a totem of dread, and every tiny movement, every tilt of the head, every sudden appearance had to be perfect. The prop team had multiple versions of the doll made, each tailored for different types of shots. One with movable limbs for dynamic staging, one stiff and pristine for display in the case, and one designed to be dirted and worn for flashbacks. But the most chilling version, according to the crew, was the one used in quiet close-ups. No movement, no sound, just the unblinking eyes and cracked porcelain. It didn't need to move to terrify. That was part of Dauberman's brilliance. He knew when to hold back. And the stillness of Annabelle, contrasted with the chaos she unleashes, makes her even more unsettling. Filming in a single location for nearly the entire runtime brought unexpected challenges. The production team had to completely transform the set of the Warren home into a versatile, modular environment. Rooms were designed with moving walls and ceilings to allow complex tracking shots. Lighting rigs were hidden within practical fixtures, lamps, chandeliers, even candle sconces, to allow for in-camera light shifts that mirrored supernatural activity. And the infamous artifact room? It was a labyrinth of layered horrors, each shelf containing an object with its own cursed backstory. Every prop was handcrafted with intention, hinting at stories untold, making the space feel ancient and dangerous. The room was built to look aged, dusty, and lived in, with each item emitting its own energy. It wasn't just a backdrop, it was a living museum of fear. To bring these cursed objects to life, the design team collaborated with lore experts from earlier films in the Conjuring universe. They took existing mythologies and expanded them, adding layers of detail that might never be fully explained on screen but would add weight and mystery. The samurai armor, for example, had a textured backstory hinted at through subtle cues. The placement of bloodstains, the sounds of distant screaming when one passes it. All of it was crafted to suggest that this wasn't just a haunted costume, but a relic of centuries of violence and vengeance. These touches may only register subconsciously to viewers, but they contribute massively to the immersive feel of the film. Sound design played another major role in elevating the terror. The audio team approached the project with the belief that silence was as important as sound. They created unique soundscapes for each entity. The ferryman was accompanied by faint rattling chains and whispering voices buried in the mix. The bride's presence was signaled by distant church bells and echoing footsteps on marble. The black shuck's growl was a blend of animalistic snarls layered with distorted human breath. Each ghost was given its own sonic fingerprint. This not only helped audiences differentiate the threats but also subtly built anticipation. You could hear the approach of fear before it arrived. One particularly chilling innovation involved the use of subsonic frequencies, low-end rumbles that aren't heard as much as they are felt. These tones were inserted beneath scenes of stillness, where nothing overtly scary was happening, to create a rising sense of dread. The audience might not know why they're tensing up, but their body responds instinctively. It's a psychological technique often used in modern horror, but Annabelle Comes Home uses it sparingly and surgically, making the moments where it's employed feel deeply unsettling. The production also had to navigate unusual challenges when filming scenes involving children. McKenna Grace, playing Judy Warren, carried a large portion of the emotional and suspenseful weight, but many of the more intense supernatural scenes had to be handled with extreme care due to her age. The filmmakers made sure to separate the scariest practical effects from the young cast during rehearsals, and some sequences were shot in layers, first filming the actor's reaction to an off-camera scare, then compositing the spectral entity and later using practical effects filmed separately. This allowed the performances to stay authentic without overwhelming the young performers. Yet despite the careful separation, McKenna Grace often amazed the crew with her ability to deliver mature, grounded reactions. According to Doberman, she instinctively understood how to convey fear without overacting, giving the film a beating heart amid all the darkness. Her subtle expressions, particularly in moments of stillness, became key focal points for the camera. It's a reminder that horror doesn't just come from effects. It comes from the human face reacting to the unknown. One of the most inventive sequences, the haunted television scene, was a last-minute addition during production. Doberman wanted a set piece that played with perception and time. In the scene, Daniela sees herself on a television screen moments before she actually performs the actions in real life. It's a psychological loop that distorts reality, inspired by vintage ghost stories and time displacement legends. The effect was achieved practically using timed playback and precisely choreographed actor movements rather than CGI. The result is a deeply unsettling moment that feels both nostalgic and modern, fitting for a film that plays with memory, grief, and déjà vu. And through all these technical innovations, there was a beating creative heart. The set wasn't just filled with props, it was filled with intention. For example, many of the cursed objects included nods to classic horror lore. A cursed monkey toy echoed Stephen King's The Monkey. A music box hummed a melody eerily similar to one heard in The Innocents. These were quiet tributes, slipped in like offerings to the genre that birthed this film. It's a loving homage to the long tradition of haunted cinema, carefully woven into the film's DNA. Yet not every creative gamble went smoothly. During early test screenings, one particular scare involving the black shuck was deemed too extreme. It caused multiple walkouts. The team decided to re-edit the sequence, dialing back the visuals and amping up the sound design instead. The final version is subtler but no less terrifying. This willingness to adapt based on audience reaction speaks to the collaborative nature of horror filmmaking, where tension and payoff must be perfectly balanced. Even the film's lighting design was approached with psychological intent. Director of photography Michael Burgess avoided the harsh blue or green filters typical in horror and instead leaned into warmer tones. Yellows, ambers, candlelight glows, only to subvert them later. When the lights dim or flicker, the warmth drains out of the frame, replaced with cold shadows and gray-blue saturation. It's not just visually effective. It mirrors the emotional temperature of each scene, plunging viewers from comfort into dread. Annabelle Comes Home may seem modest on the surface, just a haunted house movie with a familiar doll, but its technical layers run deep. Every scare is engineered with purpose. Every room is lit to reflect an emotional truth. Every piece of sound design, every lens choice, every prop has meaning. The result is a film that doesn't just aim to terrify, it aims to linger, to stay with you long after the credits roll. And perhaps that's the film's greatest achievement. It uses the tools of cinema not just to create scares, but to sculpt atmosphere, to guide emotion, and to explore human fragility through supernatural metaphor. It's a reminder that even within the boundaries of a genre known for its tropes and formulas, there's still room for artistry, innovation, and soul. And the quiet moments between the screams, Annabelle Comes Home reveals itself as more than a haunted house thrill ride. Beneath the flickering lights, beneath the glass case that holds the infamous doll, lies a story deeply rooted in grief, guilt, protection, and the fragile nature of belief. It's a film that uses its supernatural dressing not just to scare, but to reflect the way we carry burdens, emotional, spiritual, generational, and how those burdens, if left unchecked, find ways to haunt us. At the heart of the film is young Judy Warren, the daughter of famed demonologists Ed and Lorraine Warren. She is not just a child in a haunted house. She is a child growing up in the looming shadow of fear and faith. Her parents, revered by some and mocked by others, live with a foot in both the spiritual and the skeptical world. And Judy, only 10 years old, is learning what it means to inherit not just their name, but their calling. Early in the film, we see glimpses of her isolation. Schoolmates shun her, whisper about her family, some outright call them liars. This alienation is more than just childhood cruelty. It reflects society's discomfort with those who walk between the seen and the unseen. Judy, in her innocence, becomes a symbol of purity, trying to make sense of a world corrupted by evil forces both literal and metaphorical. And this sense of inheritance, of generational burden, is one of the film's most poignant themes. The Warrens lock their cursed objects away not only to protect the world, but to protect Judy from the life they've chosen. They do not bring her into exorcisms or rituals, but they can't fully shield her either. Their house, filled with echoes and artifacts, is a metaphor for the baggage parents pass on. No matter how tightly you lock the door, some things find a way to seep through. And so, when Annabelle's glass case is opened, it's not just a supernatural threat that escapes. It's the past, the weight of unspoken trauma, the forces of fear that young people often inherit before they even understand them. Annabelle herself is less of a character and more of a symbol. She is a magnet for pain, a conduit for chaos. She doesn't act, she influences. She doesn't move, yet she stirs everything around her. In many ways, she represents unresolved trauma. Just as people who suffer do not always act out, but their pain affects everything in their orbit, Annabelle's power lies in what she triggers. Every spirit unleashed is a memory or fear that has been locked away. She is the embodiment of the past refusing to be ignored. Daniela's story is perhaps the most obvious reflection of this theme. She breaks into the artifact room not out of mischief, but out of grief. Her father has died, and she cannot accept it. Her desire to connect with him, to know that he still exists somewhere, mirrors the human craving for closure. But grief is a double-edged blade. It opens the heart but also opens doors best left closed. Her intrusion isn't just physical. It's symbolic of how people often look to the supernatural to fill emotional voids. In Daniela's case, her recklessness is rooted in love, but love unchecked by reason can be dangerous. Her journey is a cautionary tale about the fine line between remembrance and obsession. Throughout the film, mirrors are used not only as scare devices, but as metaphors for self-confrontation. Characters constantly catch glimpses of themselves in reflective surfaces. Sometimes what they see isn't what's truly there. Sometimes the reflection lingers longer than it should. It's as if the house itself is challenging them to face their inner demons. In Judy's case, she sees herself becoming like her mother, psychically attuned, spiritually sensitive. In Daniela's case, she sees herself as a girl trapped by guilt. In Mary Ellen, we see the reflection of youthful courage, the kind that doesn't come from fearlessness, but from choosing to act despite it. These reflections tell the deeper story, that the real battles are often not against ghosts but within. The motif of keys and locked doors runs throughout the film, and it's more than just a mechanical plot device. It represents boundaries, emotional, spiritual, moral. Judy is told not to enter the artifact room, just as children are told not to dwell on adult traumas. But the very presence of the key tempts them. It's the forbidden knowledge trope, reminiscent of Pandora's box or the Garden of Eden. And when the key is used to open Annabelle's case, it isn't just a physical act. It's a symbolic rupture of protection, a moment where innocence gives way to confrontation with the darker side of existence. Even the spirits themselves reflect different facets of human emotion. The ferryman, who appears when his coins are disturbed, symbolizes the finality of death. The ancient myth of Sharon, carrying souls across the river Styx. His appearance reminds us that every death leaves something behind, and every passage comes at a cost. The Black Shuck, a spectral hound from British folklore, embodies pure terror, an animalistic, unstoppable force that evokes the primal fear of being hunted. The bride in the cursed dress represents possession, but also the fear of losing control, to grief, to anger, to something that isn't truly us. Each spirit isn't just a scare. They're mirrors of psychological states we wrestle with. On a larger cultural level, Annabelle Comes Home taps into the modern fear of the unsafe home. The Warren house is supposed to be a fortress, guarded by relics, blessed by priests, protected by knowledge. And yet, danger still gets in. In an age where anxiety runs high, where schools, homes, and churches are no longer guarantees of safety, the idea that evil can slip into even the most fortified places strikes a nerve. The movie doesn't offer false reassurances. Instead, it suggests that safety comes not from walls or prayers alone, but from courage, unity, and compassion in the face of the unknown. There's also a clear undercurrent of feminine power throughout the story. This is a horror film where the central characters, Judy, Mary Ellen, and Daniela, are all young women, each navigating their own battles. And while they face supernatural threats, they do so without being reduced to damsels in distress. Judy's psychic sensitivity is never treated as weakness. It's her gift, her strength. Mary Ellen's bravery isn't portrayed as exceptional, but as instinctive. And Daniela, for all her mistakes, is allowed complexity. She's not just the girl who messed everything up, but someone wrestling with loss, trying to make things right. The film's structure allows these characters room to grow, to make choices, to be scared and still fight. In a genre that has too often punished women for transgression, Annabelle Comes Home quietly flips the narrative. It shows women surviving, not because they're perfect, but because they're human. And yet, it also subtly critiques the way society treats female intuition. Judy, like her mother, sees things others can't. And like her mother, she's dismissed, misunderstood, sometimes mocked. But over and over, the film validates her instincts. It's a metaphor for how society often belittles or rationalizes away emotional intelligence, especially in girls. But the story insists belief matters, listening matters, Intuition has value. This validation of inner knowing becomes a powerful theme, especially in the climactic moments where Judy uses her understanding, not brute strength, to confront evil. The artifact room, with all its cursed objects, could easily be seen as a museum of darkness. But it also becomes something else, a metaphor for memory. Every object represents a story, a trauma, a moment in time. And like our own emotional baggage, these objects must be acknowledged, contained, and respected. The Warrens' method isn't to destroy the objects. They preserve them, study them, honor their danger. In a way, it's a message about trauma management. You don't erase pain, you contain it. You learn to live with the weight of experience. You don't let it rule you, but you don't pretend it never happened. There's something deeply symbolic in the film's resolution too. Evil isn't vanquished, it's returned to its prison. The doll isn't destroyed, it's sealed. The house isn't cleansed, it's calmed. This mirrors the real-life truth that there are no clean breaks from trauma, from fear, from grief. These things stay with us, but we can learn how to live beside them, to make peace with them. Judy's final smile isn't one of triumph, but of quiet acceptance. She's no longer afraid of what's in the dark, because she's faced it and survived. Even the setting of the film, a single night of escalating chaos, feels symbolic. Night is when fears come alive, when doubt creeps in, when children are most vulnerable. But night also passes. The sun rises, and when it does, it brings clarity. Light not just as illumination, but as understanding. This isn't a horror film that ends in total despair. It ends with the message that the worst nights can be endured, that connection and courage carry us through. In its quietest moments, Annabelle Comes Home isn't just about the supernatural. It's about the emotional echoes that never fully leave us. It's about the haunted places inside us all, the rooms we dare not enter, the grief we dare not name. But it's also about resilience, about young people inheriting a world full of shadows and choosing not to run from it. Judy, Daniela, Mary Ellen, they don't defeat the darkness by becoming warriors. They defeat it by being vulnerable, by choosing kindness, by trusting each other. And maybe that's the film's most powerful theme. That belief, true belief in something good, is the greatest defense against evil. Not belief in superstition, but belief in each other. Belief in forgiveness, in love, in hope. Even in a house filled with cursed objects, even in a world where evil is real and tangible, that belief still shines through. That's the kind of light no ghost can extinguish. Darkness in Annabelle Comes Home is more than absence. It's a character, constantly shifting, creeping, testing the limits of what the eye can tolerate and what the mind can interpret. From the very first frame, where the Warrens are transporting Annabelle to their home in the dead of night, director Gary Dauberman establishes a visual language rooted in subtlety, silence, and shadow. The air is heavy, the world dimly lit by flickering lamps and fogged over headlights, a setting that signals to the viewer. This is not a world of jump scares alone, but one of slow, smothering dread. Dauberman, making his directorial debut after scripting previous Conjuring universe entries, leans heavily on visual atmosphere, building tension through suggestion more than revelation. He's a storyteller who understands that the most effective horror often lies not in what is shown, but in what is withheld. So much of the film style is about restraint, keeping the camera still just a second longer, holding on a closed door, or lingering on a hallway where nothing seems to happen. Yet, the cinematography by Michael Burgess crafts an aesthetic of deliberate unease. He uses the frame not just to contain action, but to manipulate expectation. In nearly every shot inside the Warren home, especially in the artifact room, the camera captures wide angles that stretch into negative space, often placing the subject off-center. This spatial imbalance unsettles the viewer on a subconscious level. We're conditioned to look for symmetry in film, to expect that where a character stands implies control. But here, control is always slipping. There's always room for something else to enter the frame, something unseen, something waiting. Color plays an equally important role in shaping the film's mood. The warm golden tones of the house's interiors, what should be cozy, domestic, even comforting, are suffused with dread. the way light flickers as if warning of what lurks beneath. These golden hues clash with the cold blues of moonlight and spirit world energy, creating a silent battle of tones. When supernatural elements rise to the surface, that warmth dies. The palette shifts, often in sudden washes of pale, desaturated color. Light becomes weaponized. Shadows stretch longer than physics allow. Rooms seem smaller when lit, but endless when dark. This controlled chaos of light versus darkness becomes the film's heartbeat, pulsing faster with every step deeper into the house. The artifact room, in particular, is a visual masterpiece of claustrophobia and chaos. Lined with cursed items, each seemingly inert but quietly vibrating with menace. It's lit like a museum from hell, low, golden backlighting casting long, deliberate shadows across relics that seem to breathe with menace. The camera often glides slowly past these objects, using shallow depth of field to keep the focus razor-sharp on one item while the rest blur into abstract threat. These are not just props, they are dormant predators, and the way they're filmed ensures they feel alive, waiting. One of the most striking sequences in the film involves the Black Shuck. Here, Doberman and Burgess combine visual distortion with misdirection. As Bob peeks into the backyard, the camera mimics his gaze, darting quickly between branches and shadows. What begins as visual noise, a shape in the trees, a shifting of leaves, builds to panic as form emerges from fog. The camera doesn't capture the creature in full at first. It moves with fragmented glimpses, interrupted angles, snatches of silhouette. When it finally lunges, the viewer is already overwhelmed. It's a masterclass in the economy of fear. Show little, let sound and reaction do the rest. Sound design throughout Annabelle Comes Home is its own silent language. Every creak of the house, every metallic jingle of keys, every breath held in silence is perfectly timed. The film weaponizes quiet just as effectively as it does noise. In some scenes, all background sound drops away completely. No score, no ambient hum, leaving only the desperate breathing of a terrified character. These moments are suffocating in their isolation. They strip away the safety net, trapping the audience in raw sensation. Joseph Bishara's score, as always in the Conjuring universe, is the dark soul of the film. Bishara, who also plays demonic entities in many of the franchise's entries, understands horror from within. His compositions aren't traditionally musical. They're deeply textural, built from groaning strings, low synths, distorted choral arrangements. It's not about melody, but mood. In Annabelle Comes Home, his music rises and falls like breathing, sometimes a whisper beneath the floorboards, other times a shriek from the abyss. One recurring theme built around Annabelle herself includes faint music box notes warped into dissonance, a perfect sonic metaphor for corrupted innocence. The editing, handled by Kirk Morey, reflects the film's dual identity. Part haunted house suspense, part supernatural roller coaster. Morey balances these tones by keeping the early sequences longer and more deliberate. The camera lingers, cuts are spaced out, allowing dread to seep in. But once the artifact room is opened and the chaos begins, the editing tightens. Sequences are stitched with escalating tempo. In one standout moment, Daniela is locked inside the artifact room while multiple objects activate around her. The camera cuts between her and the sudden movement of cursed items. The piano that plays itself, the monkey toy with its symbols, the samurai armor whispering in the dark. Every cut jolts the viewer between space and fear, creating a rhythm of rising panic. Another signature sequence uses light in a way that feels almost mythic. Judy, trapped in the hallway, faces the ferryman. Coins flicker across the floor, glinting in the dimness. The sound of them rolling is amplified, unnatural. As she turns, the coins begin to float, gravity defied by malevolence. The light dims in perfect sync with her heartbeat. Every time she looks away, he's closer. This sequence is edited like a music video from hell, where visuals and audio pulse in unison to manipulate every nerve. The use of strobe and shadow isn't just for spectacle. It simulates panic, confusion, the way fear distorts perception. A quieter but no less impactful moment is Mary Ellen baking a cake in the kitchen. Seemingly innocent, but behind her, the camera slowly racks focus to Annabelle, now visible in a different place than before. There's no music, no cue, just this creeping shift in spatial understanding. That kind of restraint is what elevates the film's style. It trusts the viewer to notice. It doesn't spoon-feed the terror, it lets you discover it. The director also makes clever use of physical space to guide tension. The Warren home, though large, is shot like a labyrinth. Long corridors repeat. Rooms feel interconnected in illogical ways. Characters turn a corner and find themselves somewhere they shouldn't be. This plays on the uncanny, a technique dating back to German expressionism, where the familiar becomes subtly wrong. Doors appear where they didn't exist. Light comes from impossible angles. It's not just the spirits distorting reality. It's the house itself becoming dreamlike, hostile. In terms of camera movement, Doberman avoids shaky cam or overt stylistic flourishes. Instead, he opts for slow, creeping dolly shots that imitate a presence moving with intent. Often, the camera seems to float just behind a character's shoulder, like a phantom following them. In scenes where Annabelle is present, the camera occasionally tilts, barely noticeable but enough to convey imbalance. It's a subconscious nudge that things are wrong. One particularly inventive sequence uses a television set as both a visual and narrative device. Daniela finds a screen showing not the present, but the near future, her own actions seconds before they happen. As she watches herself turn, scream, run, the audience becomes caught in a visual loop. Time folds in on itself. Editing overlaps realities. It's a brilliant bit of meta-horror, where the medium becomes the message. Film, after all, is about frames of reality stitched together, and here those frames are haunted too. Stylistically, Doberman also incorporates moments that honor classic horror cinema. There's a shot of a door creaking open with a character's silhouette framed in candlelight, a clear nod to Gothic horror. The fog-filled backyard evokes Hammer films of the 1960s. The haunted bridal gown reflects the giallo obsession with possessed clothing. These flourishes aren't derivative, they're reverent. They place Annabelle Comes Home in a lineage of horror films that understand fear as an evolving language. In the final moments of the film, after Annabelle is returned to her case, the lighting softens. The house exhales. The color palette warms. And yet, the camera still lingers just a second longer on the artifact room as the door closes. It's a visual promise, not everything is over. Peace is momentary. In this world, the camera never truly cuts away from evil, it only pauses. Ultimately, Annabelle Comes Home stands as a beautifully crafted blend of old-school horror and modern cinematic control. Its visual language is precise. Its sound design oppressive yet artful. Its pacing tuned to the rhythm of a nightmare. Doberman doesn't rely on CGI spectacle or blood-soaked gore. He crafts tension through shadow, silence, and space. Through what's just out of view, just out of earshot, just beyond what the characters understand. And in doing so, he taps into something universal. The fear of the dark. The creak of a floorboard. The object in the room that wasn't there before. These aren't just horror tropes. They're the grammar of our deepest anxieties. And Annabelle Comes Home speaks that language fluently. On screen, horror may thrive in silence, but behind the scenes, it's often laughter that fills the air. In Annabelle Comes Home, what makes the dread so effective is the underlying warmth and sincerity among the cast. A chemistry that grounds the terror in something deeply human. Strip away the shadows, spirits, and cursed relics, and at its heart, the film is about connection. Between friends, between family, between souls lost and found. That emotional connection was born not just from the script, but from the very real rapport between the actors who brought it all to life. McKenna Grace, portraying young Judy Warren, was already a rising star known for her emotional intelligence and uncanny ability to convey maturity far beyond her years. But on this set, surrounded by legends like Vera Farmiga and Patrick Wilson, albeit in limited screen time, Grace found a new kind of dynamic. While the Warrens are only present at the beginning and end of the story, their bond with Judy had to resonate throughout the entire film. That's where Grace's subtlety came in. Her performance is grounded, never overly dramatic, and yet loaded with internal complexity. She walks through the Warren house not as a typical child reacting to monsters, but as someone who feels the weight of legacy and expectation. And much of that authenticity came from how she was treated off-camera. Vera Farmiga, known for her maternal warmth on and off screen, reportedly connected with Grace immediately. The pair developed a quiet rhythm between takes, talking, laughing, trading stories. That closeness translated into brief but powerful moments on screen, like when Lorraine reassures Judy before leaving her in Mary Ellen's care. There's a gentle intimacy in the way they look at each other, no exposition needed. And when Grace was asked in interviews how she found such emotional depth, she credited Vera with helping her feel protected and seen. Meanwhile, Madison Eisman brought an effervescent warmth to Mary Ellen, the babysitter turned heroine. She and Grace had to forge a believable, sister-like connection, and that came naturally. Their off-screen bond was full of pranks and jokes, which gave their on-screen scenes a lightness and believability that made the scares even more impactful. Mary Ellen isn't a typical final girl. She's responsible, caring, and quietly courageous. Traits that could easily fall flat without the right energy behind them. But Eisman, with her natural charisma, elevates those traits into something deeply endearing. And when the fear does hit her character, we feel it because we like her. We want her to survive. Katie Sarif, playing the impulsive and grief-stricken Daniela, walked a trickier line. Her character is responsible for unleashing the chaos, but she's not a villain. That required nuance, and Sarif delivered, thanks in part to how supported she felt on set. Director Gary Dauberman encouraged improvisation in emotionally heavy moments, giving Sarif space to let Daniela's pain feel real. One behind-the-scenes story reveals how, during a key scene in the artifact room, Sarif asked if she could touch her real-life grandfather's ring hidden in her costume pocket to center herself emotionally. That small detail added weight to her performance, particularly in moments when Daniela connects with the spirit world to contact her deceased father. The camera catches that conflict in her eyes. Fear, hope, guilt, and longing. It's not melodramatic. It's raw, and that's what makes it stick. The chemistry between these three young women, Judy, Mary Ellen, and Daniela, anchors the entire film. Horror is most effective when we care about who's suffering, and in this case, the dynamic between the trio gives the movie an emotional heartbeat. They're not interchangeable victims. They each have distinct voices and relationships, and those relationships evolve under pressure. Mary Ellen becomes the protective older sister. Judy matures into a brave leader. Daniela transforms from selfish risk-taker to self-sacrificing friend. Their arcs intertwine naturally, made possible by the actress's real connection on and off camera. Off-set, the mood was anything but grim. Despite the haunted subject matter, the cast often broke tension with humor. McKenna Grace, fascinated by the ghost stories that inspired the film, would often quiz the crew about the real Annabelle doll. Madison Eisman, more skeptical of the supernatural, reportedly refused to go near the actual glass case on set unless cameras were rolling. The crew even staged a fake scare involving the Annabelle prop doll, moving her to unexpected places on set, like inside someone's trailer or sitting upright at the craft services table. These antics created an environment where trust and playfulness thrived, which made it easier for the cast to dive deep into fear when the cameras rolled. Dauberman, being both writer and director, fostered a collaborative energy. His background as the scribe behind multiple Conjuring universe entries gave him an intimate understanding of this world, but he welcomed actor input, encouraging moments that felt spontaneous. When Daniela walks through the artifact room whispering, "I'm sorry," to each cursed object, that wasn't initially in the script. It came from a conversation between Sarif and Dauberman about Daniela's guilt. Those kinds of additions may seem small, but they're what give horror stories their emotional punch. When Annabelle Comes Home premiered, the reactions were passionate. Fans of the Conjuring universe praised the film for offering something new. A haunted house adventure that felt like a supernatural escape room, claustrophobic, tense, but oddly fun. The tonal shift from previous entries, which leaned heavily into bleak terror, made this installment feel more accessible to younger audiences without dulling the scares. It was horror with a heartbeat, and that balance resonated deeply. Audiences particularly connected with Judy Warren. Her vulnerability and strength made her a breakout favorite. For many viewers, especially younger ones, seeing a child navigate fear and come out empowered was something rare. Online fan discussions exploded with appreciation for McKenna Grace's performance. Some viewers shared stories of overcoming childhood trauma and anxiety, saying Judy's bravery inspired them. Others celebrated the film's portrayal of grief through Daniela's arc, praising how the supernatural was used as a metaphor for unresolved pain. Critics, while mixed on the overall pacing, largely agreed that the cast chemistry elevated the film. Several reviews highlighted that, despite being the third Annabelle installment, this was the most emotionally resonant. Rolling Stone described it as a haunted house ride powered by 3 terrific performances and surprising warmth. Horror sites like Bloody Disgusting and Dread Central gave kudos to the quieter character moments, noting that the relationships felt lived in rather than manufactured. And then there were the hardcore fans, the ones who know every cursed item in the artifact room by name. They latched onto the movie's interwoven universe, flooding Reddit threads and YouTube breakdowns with theories about spin-offs. Could the ferryman get his own film? What about the haunted samurai armor? The Bride? Annabelle Comes Home didn't just satisfy, it expanded the mythology, giving fans a playground of horrors to obsess over. Conventions were buzzing with cosplay tributes not just to Annabelle, but to lesser-known spirits introduced in the film. The movie became more than a one-off scare, it became canon. The bond between cast and audience extended far beyond the screen. McKenna Grace actively engaged with fans on social media, often posting behind-the-scenes photos, signing memorabilia, and sharing her favorite scary movies. Katie Sarif became a frequent guest on horror podcasts, discussing grief, ghosts, and the empathy embedded in the genre. Madison Eisman, reflecting on the role in interviews, often emphasized how playing Mary Ellen helped her appreciate the strength in kindness, a trait fans repeatedly highlighted. Even the infamous Annabelle prop gained unexpected stardom. Tour exhibits for Annabelle Comes Home featured interactive versions of the artifact room, letting fans walk through replicas of the set. The production design had been so meticulously detailed that viewers wanted to experience it for themselves. From the creaking floorboards to the cursed piano, every piece felt storied, authentic. For fans, this wasn't just a set, it was sacred ground. And yet, for all its crafted dread and demonic drama, what stayed with people was how Annabelle Comes Home treated its characters. In a genre too often populated by throwaway victims, this film gave us a trio of heroines worth rooting for. And that came down to the performances, the honest laughter shared between takes, the trust in one another's timing, the commitment to emotional truth. There's a moment late in the film, after the spirits have quieted, when Mary Ellen, Judy, and Daniela sit together in silence. No screams, no chaos. Just 3 people bound by what they've endured. The camera holds. There's no music. And in that stillness, everything lands. The fear, the relief, the bond. That moment isn't powerful because of visual effects or clever sound design. It's powerful because we believe in them, in their connection, their courage, their humanity. That's the real magic of Annabelle Comes Home. It haunts you not just with demons and dolls, but with people who feel real, who love, who fight, who survive. And it's that authenticity, fueled by cast chemistry, enriched by set camaraderie, and celebrated by a loyal audience, that makes the film not just another entry in a franchise, but a story that lingers. When Annabelle Comes Home crept into theaters on June 26, 2019, it did more than just deliver another chapter in a franchise already steeped in supernatural lore. It quietly solidified itself as a key pillar in one of the most successful horror universes in cinematic history. It's easy to mistake the film as a simple spin-off, another haunted doll story meant to squeeze one more scream out of an audience. But its legacy is far richer, far more enduring than that. This wasn't just another tale of terror. It was a haunting with heart, a ghost story wrapped in grief, hope, and ultimately, connection. And in the years that followed, Annabelle Comes Home proved itself to be a defining moment, not just for the Conjuring universe, but for modern horror as a whole. What makes Annabelle Comes Home's legacy so distinct is how it reshaped expectations. Horror, especially in the 2010s, had been evolving, moving away from cheap thrills and toward stories with emotional resonance. Films like Hereditary, The Babadook, and Get Out had already begun the transformation. But Annabelle Comes Home found a different path. Instead of diving headfirst into existential dread, it took a more classic route, embracing the gothic, the ghostly, the atmospheric, and merged it with the warmth of a coming-of-age tale. That blend, unexpected yet seamless, carved a new space within the genre. Horror didn't have to be bleak to be effective. Could be heartfelt, could be character-driven, could even be, dare we say, fun. The film also acted as a genre bridge. For younger audiences, Annabelle Comes Home was often their first foray into horror. It wasn't as brutal as earlier Conjuring entries or as psychologically scarring as the indie horror wave. Instead, it introduced viewers to the genre's building blocks: tension, anticipation, dread, and catharsis. The haunted house setup, the flickering lights, the ghostly whispers. These were horror fundamentals, made accessible without compromising effectiveness. It was a movie that scared without traumatizing, teaching audiences how to watch horror by letting them breathe between the screams. Its influence on pop culture was both subtle and far-reaching. The film's concept, one night trapped inside a house filled with cursed artifacts, sparked endless memes, fan theories, and creative content. TikTok challenges emerged, with creators pretending to survive the Warren artifact room. Fan art flooded social media, each piece imagining new stories for cursed objects like the ferryman's coins or the haunted wedding dress. These weren't just throwaway Easter eggs, they became seeds for future mythology. The audience wasn't just watching, they were expanding the universe in real time. And then there's Annabelle herself. The doll, already infamous thanks to her appearances in The Conjuring and her 2 prior spin-offs, became a horror icon in her own right. But Annabelle Comes Home redefined her role. Here, she's not just a possessed object, she's the epicenter of a supernatural storm, a beacon for every cursed entity lurking in the dark. This portrayal elevated her from ghost story gimmick to franchise queen. After this film, she wasn't just a prop, she was legacy. Halloween costumes, collectibles, and even themed escape rooms popped up across the globe. The doll had become a symbol of dread, yes, but also of a new generation of horror fans discovering fear through her eyes. In terms of filmmaking, Annabelle Comes Home left its mark through its narrative structure and visual language. It embraced a confined space and used it creatively, proving that horror doesn't need sprawling locations to be terrifying. The film's ability to turn a suburban home into a labyrinth of terror inspired other creators to rethink scale. Low-budget horror filmmakers especially cited the movie as a blueprint. If you can master atmosphere, sound, and character, you don't need a massive set. Tension is location-agnostic if crafted well. The film also marked the directorial debut of Gary Dauberman, already a familiar name for horror fans thanks to his writing on Annabelle, Creation, IT, and The Nun. With Annabelle Comes Home, Dauberman proved himself not just as a writer of scares, but as a visual storyteller. His control over pacing, suspense, and emotional rhythm was applauded, opening doors for more horror screenwriters to take the director's chair. It was a signal to the industry. Trust the writers, because sometimes the best scares are born on the page before they're ever shot through a lens. While the film didn't sweep award circuits, horror rarely does, it was a commercial success and a fan favorite. It grossed over $230 million worldwide on a modest budget, a testament to the enduring appeal of the Conjuring brand and the character-driven approach this installment took. More importantly, it earned something money can't buy: loyalty. Fans returned to this film not just for the scares, but for the characters. For Judy's quiet strength. For Mary Ellen's warmth. For Daniela's grief and redemption. In a genre often dominated by formula, Annabelle Comes Home gave us characters who felt alive, even when surrounded by death. And of course, there's Annabelle herself. No longer a passive object or just a cursed doll in a glass box. She's elevated here to something more mythic. She becomes a conduit, a magnet for malice, yes, but also a symbol of the unseen forces we wrestle with. Her presence looms over the house like a spiritual gravity well, drawing in every shadow. And yet, the film reminds us that power, no matter how dark, isn't absolute, can be confronted, contained, even survived. The true genius of Annabelle Comes Home lies in its willingness to blend tones. One moment we're laughing with Mary Ellen and Bob as teenage awkwardness blooms. The next, we're holding our breath as Daniela stands alone before a haunted mirror. These tonal shifts don't weaken the story. They enrich it. They reflect life itself. Messy, emotional, scary, funny, and unpredictable. Horror, at its best, doesn't just terrify, it reflects. And this film reflects us. It's easy to forget just how rare it is for a franchise film, especially a third entry in a spin-off series, to be this thoughtful. Many expected Annabelle Comes Home to follow a tired formula, deliver jump scares, and retreat into the safety of franchise patterns. Instead, it expanded the mythology. It introduced new ghosts, new lore, and new ideas. Took risks, and those risks paid off. Critically and commercially, the film may not have received the headlines some of its peers did, but its long-term legacy is undeniable. Fans continue to revisit it not just for its set pieces but for its mood, for the way it makes them feel. It's the kind of movie that reveals more each time you watch. The kind that grows richer with context and memory. The kind that lingers. Years from now, when we look back on the golden age of horror universes, Annabelle Comes Home will be remembered not as a footnote, but as a foundation. It proved that horror franchises could be more than sequels and scares. They could be emotional. They could be character-driven. They could be bold. The film also recentered the importance of emotional stakes in genre storytelling. The scares are scarier when we care. The silence is deeper when it follows a character we love. And the resolution is more satisfying when it comes not from banishing a ghost, but from healing a wound. That's the film's real triumph. Not in how loudly it screams, but in how softly it speaks to the soul. And what about its place in horror history? It may never sit atop the mountain of critical acclaim like The Exorcist or Psycho, but Annabelle Comes Home doesn't need to. Its power lies in the quiet victories, in the scenes that stay with you, in the flicker of Judy's flashlight, in the creak of the hallway, in the smile shared between Mary Ellen and Judy after the chaos has passed. These are the film's legacy. Moments that feel real, even when surrounded by the unreal. In a world flooded with horror content, Annabelle Comes Home took a different path. It chose sincerity over cynicism, emotion over excess, story over spectacle. And in doing so, it carved out a place not just in the Conjuring timeline, but in our hearts. So as we close the book on this particular deep dive, we return to that flickering light in the darkness, that quiet message at the core of the film. Evil is real, but so is love. So is forgiveness. So is the courage to face what scares us and still move forward. And that is why Annabelle Comes Home endures. If you love this breakdown, give the video a thumbs up and subscribe for more deep dives into the world of cinema. Let's keep exploring movies together.